Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with another big box, and this time actually a very unusual one from a major label. It's not like the usual stuff, the greatest hits of so-and-so or a major composer box or something. It is Josquin and the Franco-Flemish School. I mean, that's a pretty remarkable undertaking for a major label. This is Warner that is undertaking it. And in case you were wondering, Josquin, also known as Josquin des Prés, was the greatest French composer of the High Renaissance. He lived from about 1440 to 1521. So he had a good, long, productive life, which was something you really couldn't count on in those days. And he was the most famous composer in Europe, aided in no small degree by the invention of printing. He was one of the first major composers to have his music printed. And as a result of that, it was able to be disseminated easily throughout Europe. And not only was his music printed, but everyone else's was printed under his name because he was famous. And publishers, as always in those days, were looking to make a quick buck, and they weren't too picky about how they attributed a piece of music, assuming they even knew. I mean, sometimes they got something and it looked nice, and someone said, "Oh, it's by Josquin. Give me $5 and it's yours." And they said, "Okay," or 5 kroner or ducats or philostomies or whatever their currency was in those days. That's what they did. So it was very, very easy for him to acquire a considerable body of work, about 300 and some odd pieces, of which about 160 or so, 140 or so are probably authentic, and that's what we're basically listening to now for the most part, although you never know, because these are some of the older recordings of the early music, really early music. I mean, before period instrument stuff, because there weren't instruments. This is just vocal music for the most part. Yeah, there were instruments. We'll get to that. But this is 34 CDs of stuff. It's quite a tremendous and compendious collection. And it's a wonderful thing. They all just threw it in a box. Now, very, very little is known about Josquin. Really remarkably little. There are about 18 mass settings, 60 motets, 60 chansons, French songs. He was French. I mean, so, they're mostly French. And that's basically his output. There may be a few instrumental pieces, but they have text you're not really sure. And there were some frottole, which was an Italian secular contrapuntal song, sort of the precursor of the madrigal, and some other things that he kind of invented. But he was the most admired composer. Everybody copied him. Everybody wanted to be like him. We don't know anything about him. Virtually nothing. We know where he popped up now and again as he traveled around Europe, which he did. He was in Italy. He was sort of all over the place. And virtually nothing is known of his personality. There are no known extended examples of his writings, of anything. He's completely a cipher. All we have is the music, which is actually a good thing because it means we have to focus on listening to that and not to a lot of extraneous biographical detail. Although there is one absolutely fascinating fact that's really, really worth considering. There are a couple pictures of him. I'm putting one up here. Now look at this photo. It's not a photo, It's a woodcut. And there he is. But recent scholarship has determined that the photo there suggests that he may have been a Rastafarian, because you can see from the dread bag on top of his head that there was something under there. And in those days, of course, this was a time in Europe where everybody was pretending to be something else. You had the fake Jews and Muslims trying to be Catholics in Spain. You had, fake everything being everybody. And so if he was a Rastafarian, he would have had to, disguise it by appearing Catholic. And that's true, but there are clues in his music. For example, there's the fabulous Missa Satiam Anima, Satiat, pardon me, let me get it straight. It's the Missa Satiat Anima Meam. It's the Mass, Satiat Anima Meam means satisfy my soul. I mean, that's a Bob Marley song. And there's considerable evidence that hidden in these pieces are several Bob Marley songs, which were, of course, quite popular in the early 15th century, but not in Central Europe, where Josquin happened to be working. So how he got a hold of Bob Marley and how he worked it into his masses. I mean, the Satisfy My Soul is the cantus firmus in the Kyrie and the Gloria. And in the Credo, it's turned into a series of prolation canons and double counterpoint. It's quite extraordinary. So and if you play the whole thing on steel drums, the resemblance becomes unmistakable. So that's one of those theories that we cannot prove, but which is, it's so suggestive musically. It really is. And I think that woodcut speaks for itself. It would be fascinating because if that's true, Josquin would become the first and certainly the greatest high Renaissance Rastafarian composer before Bob Marley. So there we go. And I'd like to go through the box now and see what's in here. There's a lot of stuff in here. Really, I mean, it's a beautiful box. Warner does nice boxes. They're sturdy. They hold together well. I mean, it's thick cardboard. It's not, going to go to pieces instantaneously. So you get your little booklet. Wait a minute. Here's the little booklet. And that tells you something about the Franco-Flemish school, of which Josquin was the greatest exponent, and that's what's in the box, Josquin and the Franco-Flemish school, from beginning to end, really about 2 centuries of music, almost. A lot of fabulous, fabulous, fabulous music. And I want to make one other point before we go into the actual discs. You may hear people say that these are older recordings, and as a result of the fact that they're older recordings, they are no longer consistent with the latest scholarship. Okay, let's put this whole business to bed. There are 2 kinds of musicological scholarship: the real kind and the bullshit kind. The real kind does things like, establishes the actual, this is confusing, wait a minute, establishes the actual composer, gets the attribution correct, works on getting a readable, accurate text for the work in question, resolves any confusion about what the actual notes are and how it was written and what the composer intended. Those things are all wonderful. Then there's the bullshit kind of musical scholarship. That's the kind that does things like says, well, if you don't sing it in note égal, where you take all the notes look the same, but you don't sing them evenly, or you don't do this, or you don't do that, it's an illegitimate performance. The fact is, the very simple fact is, that musical performances, no matter what the theory behind them, are usually, not always, but usually 95% the same. I mean, I'm leaving out questions of interpretation for a moment. I mean, what I mean by that is that things like good intonation, clear enunciation of text, proper balances, good rhythm, beautiful timbres, those things are what the music consists of. No matter what, no matter how you do it, no matter what period it was written in. And so just because somebody doesn't, do the Flibberty Widget thing with the second alto or something, that doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it wrong at all. And more to the point, we all know that the current scholarship in a bunch of years is going to be the old scholarship, which will be disproven to have been completely incorrect and illegitimate according to the latest scholarship. So there's a difference between solid musical research, solid musical values, and a fad. And there is real musicianship and real musical scholarship and fad musical scholarship. So these performances are mostly real musical scholarship, although, of course, they subscribe to the fad musical scholarship of their own day, which today may regard as yesterday's news. But we don't hear that, and we don't know it, and most normal listeners don't care and won't notice, so don't worry about it. That's that. Now, let's see what we got here, shall we? All right. It begins with Binchois. There are a lot of names here you're not going to know, and which is good because you probably won't know if I'm mispronouncing them, which I'm definitely going to do. So let's not worry about that. Binchois. There he is, Gilles Binchois. These are French chansons. Now, a chanson is just a song, often a polyphonic song, and there's multiple parts. They're quite lovely. They're secular. They're all about the things that songs are always about. Love, women, the love of women, the lack of women, the need for women, the suffering of love, the delirious ecstasy of love, the suffering for the delirious ecstasy of love. That's what songs are. And that's what these are too. And it's actually fascinating to listen to them because, you get the sense that songs have been songs since the dawn of time. The style may be different, but the concept is the same. There are no texts and translations anywhere in here. And I don't think they're even on a website. I don't think they even do that much because, it's a problem. You're just going to have to listen to and enjoy the music unless you can find them elsewhere. That's just the way it goes. When it comes to Latin texts, it's not a problem, of course, because, we all know what the text of the Mass is, and it's certainly easy enough to find since it hasn't changed for a few thousand years. Same thing with the motets. You can find they're usually psalm settings, and you can find them easily enough. But anyway, chansons. So, and it's sung by the Ensemble Gilles Binchois, the hometown team. It's an authentic instrument performance. No, I'm not kidding. They're more recent than Mr. Binchois, but they're fun. They're nice pieces. Then we have Guillaume Dufay, Vide, and Binchois. Dufay was probably the most famous guy out there before Josquin popped up. One of the most famous, anyway. And this is what is this thing? It's called, you can't even read it, Le Banquet de Veau. No, it's not that. It's some sort of thing that was written or compiled around 1454 or thereabouts. And this is also with Ensemble Gilles Binchois. A lot of these were on Reflexa. Remember EMI Reflexa? That was their the EMI's German competition to Deutsche Grammophon's archive label, their early music label. And, you might have seen them back in those days. It was a wonderful series of all this stuff on it. Then we have more Dufay and Binchois, The Art of Courtly Love and the Court of Burgundy. This is, of course, where some of these troubadours and composers went because the ruling tyrant supported the arts when they weren't, whoring around or torturing their own subjects or making war on the castle next door. They were celebrating the art of love, and they had to hire composers to write music apostrophizing the theoretical beauty of the reigning monarchess and the monarch who paid the salary. And, anyway, that's where they were. So this is with the early music consort of London. Remember, with James Bowman and those countertenors. You have to deal with the early days of the English countertenor. A fairly scary prospect. But in this kind of music, they sound a lot better. They really do. And then we have, the Dufay Mass. Si la face est pâle. If your face is pale. Ooh, that's so cool. And Gloria ad mundum turbe. And the chanson, Si la face est pâle. Because masses in those days were based on popular songs. Just like Josquin's, based on Bob Marley's, Satisfy My Soul. It was a common practice in those days. And this is, again, the early music consort of London. Then there's a Dufay, motets and chansons. Here we go. With the studio for early music, Das Studio der Frühen Musik. So that's with Thomas Binkley. They made a lot of terrific records back in the day. And this one is particularly lovely. I really enjoy this one. And then more Dufay, the Missa Ecce Ancilla Domini, or Ancilla, however you want to pronounce it. And his Properium de Angelus Dei Officium, who knows what that means. The Ensemble Gilles Binchois, once again. And then Dufay, the L'Homme Armé Mass. That was even more popular than Satisfy My Soul. That was the greatest hit of basically the entire 15th, 16th centuries. And I did a talk about this, about L'Homme Armé and that kind of stuff. If you watch Dave's Handy Guide to Renaissance Polyphony, it's another video. We talk all about L'Homme Armé, the armed man, and the tune. Ya da 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 da. Da da dum da 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 da. You've heard it. It was the subject of all kinds of mass settings, like a couple dozen of them that have come down to us, and motets and all kinds of things. Very, very popular song, and lots of sacred music was based on it. Probably a lot more than was based on Satyat Animam Meam. And so, which again is just lends credence to the idea that Josquin was a Rastafarian. Anyway, then we have Dufay, Binchois, and his time, which is like more stuff by them with the Syntagma Musicum. It's like Musica Urethra, Tinnitus Classics, early music ensemble. These names that they come up with. I mean, it just can't be like the Beatles or something. It has to be something that sounds deep and profound and Latin or something like that. I don't get it. And then we have Dufay in his time with Syntagma Musicke. Again, unless I just said that, I don't even know. And now let's see what else have we got. Here's another pile. Oh, the Hilliard Ensemble. The early Hilliard Ensemble recordings before they became totally famous. This is where they got started, or one of the places. And we have the Requiem by Ockeghem. It's the earliest polyphonic setting of the Requiem that has come down to us, I think. And the Missa Mimi. Mimi is the motto that runs through the entire Mass. Actually, Ockeghem was incredibly revered, hugely, enormously revered. His dates are so tiny, you can barely see them, but they were 14-something, like 1410, it looks like, or 14-something to 1497. But he was known for his polyphonic genius. He was considered a great singer, a great composer, / scholar. He didn't write a ton, or at least not a ton has come down to us, but he was one of the great Netherlandish composers of the era, part of the Franco-Belgian school, the Franco-Flemish school, pardon me, it's Flemish. There's a lot of controversy now in scholarly circles about whether there ever even was a Franco-Flemish school. And if anybody has the gall, the chutzpah, to even mention this in the comments, you will be deleted so fast you're not going to even see the blur. Believe me. No one cares. Ockeghem, this is it. The Missa Prolationum. This is a mass that consists entirely of prolated canons. And what a prolated canon is doesn't really matter. You don't have to worry about it, but it has to do with, you know what a canon is. It's a round, like row your boat. It's one part follows the other part at a fixed distance in time and also in interval. And in a prolated canon, the note values can change so that it's still a canon, but parts can move at different speeds. It's quite fascinating. It's a contrapuntal trick of the highest order, and the entire Mass consists of them. Whereas, Josquin's Missa Satiat Animam Meam, the Satisfy My Soul Mass, only uses them in the credo. But Ockeghem was, yes. He was like the contrapuntal genius of his day. And now we come to Josquin. A whole bunch of Josquin discs, motets, was this, by the way, was still the Hilliard Ensemble? Yes, we are still in the Hilliard Ensemble. Then the Capella Antiqua München under Conrad Ruland. Yes, Josquin motets. Fabulous. And actually one of these one of these, I believe, yes, Alma Redemptoris Mater, the soul of the Redeeming Mother. That is based on a Canus Firmus, which turned out to be Bob Marley's Judgment Song or Redemption Song. That's it. The Redemption Song by Bob Marley is the Cantus Firmus from that motet. And then we have the Missa Pange Lingua and Miserere Me Deus. This is with the Chorale Philippe Caillard, whoever they were. They can sing. That's all that matters. They can sing. All these people can sing. Then we have more Hilliard Ensemble, Josquin motets and chansons. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I can't play samples, unfortunately, because it's a major label, and so I'm not going to make us crazy. The Missa Ave Maris Stella. That is such a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous piece of music. If you want to hear one piece by Josquin, well, the L'Homme Armé masses are probably more famous, but listen to the Missa Ave Maris Stella. It is stunning, absolutely stunning. And this has the Taverner Consort. Remember them? And the Taverner Choir with Andrew Parrott. Andrew Parrott was the guy who got me going, trying to prove the whole period instrument movement was wrong about vibrato, because he very snootily wrote to me after I reviewed a BIS recording of Beethoven's Third Piano Concerto with Ronald Brautigam quite favorably, except I said the strings were scratchy and thin for lack of vibrato. And he sent me an extremely obnoxious email basically saying, well, who the hell are you? I studied this, so you don't know what you're talking about, that kind of stuff. And so I said, oh, really? And I wrote 600 pages on why his position on vibrato was stupid. And the rest, as they say, is history. So thank you, Mr. Parrott, for giving me the opportunity to prove how wrong you were. Anyway, he was pretty good in early music. He didn't have strings. He wasn't bad. And he's okay. And we have the Josquin Dupré, the Missa Hercule Dux Farie. This was a mass that was composed as a praise piece to one of his royal patrons. And then some more motets and other stuff, the usual thingies with the Hilliard Ensemble. It's great to have all this Hilliard Ensemble stuff, isn't it? I have a wrinkle there. It's making me crazy. Oh, there you go. You can see. Today. All right. Then we have Josquin des Prés, Clairot, Chaud, wow, Chardavoine, Le Jeune, and Sermici. Fortunately, we don't know how any of this stuff was pronounced back in the day, so if I say Chardavoine and it was really Chardavoine, who knows? I could be just as right. And this is with Ensemble Gilles Binchois. Don't you love all these pictures, these funky little people here? And then we have another Josquin, and we have Isaac and Agricola and Ockeghem. There's a cool guy. Ockeghem and Brummel. Brummel wrote the Earthquake Mass. The Missa et in Terra Moto, whatever it was, and the earth moved. This is with the Early Music Consort of London. And with Sally Dunkley, some of these people became part of the Tallis Scholars. These are all famous names, but here some of them were in the first flush of youth, and that was probably a good thing. Some of them were in their freshest voice. And then we have another Josquin, Isaac Obrecht, Ockeghem, Brummel. This is called The Art of the Netherlands. It was a several-disc series, and it's also with the Early Music Consort of London. You'll notice, none of the rest of them are dressed like Rastafarians. Only Josquin had the dread bag on his head. And now we have Heinrich Isaac. He was wonderful. This is the Missa Super Au Préclara and some chansons with, this is the first release on CD. A lot of these are. A lot of these were on CD. With the Capella Antiqua München. There we go. Which is lovely. See, most people look like that without the dreads. They were like those funny monkey haircut guys, And then we have more Isaac, the Easter Masses, Missa Pascale, some chansons and motets with the Hilliard Ensemble. And now we're coming to the last pile, the last dozen or so discs. This is just a treasure of high Renaissance choral music. It really is. It's just a marvelous thing to be out. And if you care at all about this, it's not expensive. Grab it while you can. I mean, it's going to go away. It will probably never be back. And having said that, I'm sure it will like pop up in a digital download for 15 cents. But until then, this is really great to have. De Monte, the Missa in 8 voices, La Dolce Vista. Not to be confused with La Dolce Vita. That's a different thing. But this is Philip de Monte, and or Philippe, pardon me, not Philip. Sorry. With the Hilliard Ensemble and the Keys Burke Consort. Great. Pierre de la Rue, his Requiem. He was another early Requiem guy. And some motets. His Requiem's quite famous. And as is this performance, with the Capella Antiqua München. So there you go. And more Pierre de la Rue, the Missa cum jocundiati joconditate. Whatever. And it's with, the Hilliard Ensemble. The Hilliards, yes. This is, now they're playing the game, how many gruesome medieval photos of the crucified Christ can they find for their album covers? It's a challenge when you have a 30-some-odd CD set. It really is. Then we have the guy named Crequion. C-R-E, just look at that. You pronounce it. C-R-E-C-Q-W-I-L-L-O-N. Crequion. Okay, whatever. And this is with the Ensemble per Cantar et Sonar and the Ensemble Vocal Stéphane Kayat. Directed by Stéphane Kayat, which makes sense, I suppose. Oh, boy. Lassus. Oh, Orlando de Lassus. Now, with Lassus, we come sort of to the end of the Franco-Belgian school, because after that, you kind of get into the early Baroque. You're getting up into the 1600s, and the Baroque people are getting warmed up here. And Lassus, so let's see what his dates were. Gosh, you can't even see this. It's terrible. Well, was he 1594? 1532 to 1594. But he's considered to be somewhat sort of the next phase of that style, sometimes by some scholars. Anyway, I read that somewhere. They could be wrong. I could be wrong. Lassus was an enormously great composer. After Josquin, he was the most highly respected composer in Europe, probably. And this is the penitential psalms. This is beautiful, beautiful stuff with the Hilliard Ensemble. This is just gorgeous, gorgeous works. And they're done, some of these pieces, it's not the usual a cappella stuff. A lot of these, including this record, that one, have instrumental accompaniments or some of the vocal lines doubled by instruments. So you get to hear considerably more color than in these sort of pure, just vocal-only approaches, which is really kind of cool. Then we have more Lassus psalms. There's a whole bunch of those. And then Lassus motets and chansons, which was that with the Hilliard Ensemble still. And more Lassus chansons with the King's Singers. These have a little more swing and groove, I suppose, since we have the King's Singers, along with the Beatles' greatest hits, which they took off of that disc just to leave the Lassus. It was Lassus and McCartney swing to never mind. And then we have Lassus Sacred Music with the King's Singers. There they are. And Lassus Madrigals and Motets with the, holy crap, okay, the Alsfelder Vocal Ensemble from Alsfelder. Well, there you go. And, madrigals. Now we're in the madrigal period. Yeah, the late 15s and early 16s. The Consort of Musicke with Anthony Rooley, with Emma Kirkby when she was 12, right after she won Britain's Got Talent. This was her first recording, probably. And then some other people. And, oh my goodness, the Consort of Musicke, M-U-S-I-C-K-E, which makes it so different. This is Yatches, this guy spells his name Giaches, and it's pronounced Devert. And his madrigals are wonderful. Really, he's one of the great madrigalists. Really, really, really one of the great madrigalists. So that's terrific to have. And Willaert, sacred and secular works. He was another really wonderful composer of that time. Let's see, who's doing this one? This is with the Ensemble Vocal de Bruxelles. So from Bruxelles. And with Ensemble Polyphonies, which has Bartold Kuiken. The Kuikens are in here. See, all these people, they had their own groups, and they became famous later doing their own thing, but they had to start somewhere. And this is one of the places they started. And then finally, last but not least, oh yes, we have recorder music from the Renaissance in Netherlands, along with dances by Susato, who was one of the first ever publishers of secular dance music. And this is with the Vienna Recorder Ensemble, the Vienna Blockflöten Ensemble, and the Early Music Consort of London with David Monroe, the late, great David Monroe. And it's a big long sucker, too. It's a couple discs sort of all jammed together. So this is a wonderful way to conclude the set, because we are beginning to arrive at the advent of ensemble music for instruments. And most ensemble music for instruments at this period was simply sacred music or secular music where the vocal parts were played by instruments. And voila, you had ensemble music. And this is a wonderful way to conclude the series with the style that was to come. And let me just grab these things back together now. So I think you can see that this is a remarkable collection of stuff. It really is virtually that the entire Reflexa catalog, from this period anyway, from this particular era in this style. And it's so wonderful when you see stuff that was just, moldering away in unreleased and unloved and unlistened to, that it comes back and reemerges, because it doesn't make any sense just sitting in a vault somewhere. It ought to be available. People ought to have a chance to listen to it. Granted, they're not going to make a fortune off of this probably, but they may sell out the set because it doesn't have a lot of competition. There's tremendous competition in this repertoire now from lots of other ensembles on individual discs and smaller sets, but something this, an anthology of this size and this quality and this scope, there aren't that many of them out there. And if you're just trying to put together a representative collection of great music from like the dawn of notated music till the present, you got to have this. You just have to have it. So there you go. Josquin and the Franco-Flemish School. 34 CDs from Warner Classics. Pretty cool, huh? Bob Marley must be smiling down on us from above. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Take care.